Thanks so much for joining us here on the Daily Racing Form YouTube. Gino Buccola along with David Aragona. We're here for a preview of race number 12 on Saturday at Saratoga. It is the Grade 2 Flower Bowl, $500,000 up for grabs. It's the third of three graded stakes races in a row, David, and we'll have a familiar face in this one as we take a look at the odds for the Flower Bowl. Warlike Goddess won this race back in 2021, was second in this race back in 2022, and she's a really cool 7-year-old mare. She has been a multiple graded stakes winner and a grade 1 winner in 2021, 2022, and 2023 so far. She got her graded stakes win in 2024. She's looking for another graded stakes win here in the Flower Bowl. So she's the one they'll likely all have to hold off in here, but McCulloch is in nice form right now. And as we look at the Timeform US pace projector in a second, this race doesn't have all that much early speed signed on.
Yeah, Warlike Goddess has been one of the leaders of this division for going on 4 seasons now, and I think she's actually looking to make it back to her 4th consecutive Breeders' Cup, which would be quite a feat for a mare like her. Probably trying the filly and mare turf this year, or they've tried the Breeders' Cup turf against the males the last couple of seasons, but the fact that they're running in the Flower Bowl, I wonder if they're using that as a prep for the race that she almost won at the same venue that they're having the Breeders' Cup this year, Del Mar, back in 2021. She's the horse to beat in this race, but there are some other talented runners in here, like McCulloch, who upset Warlike Goddess over this course last year, a Charlie Appleby runner and Eternal Hope. And as we take a look at that Timeform US pace projector for this Flower Bowl, I think we should discuss a little bit the pace scenario as in terms of who's going to be on the front end, because you see that no speed designation. That's something that we put into the Timeform US pace projector to differentiate from a favors front runner scenario. We put in the favors front runners designation when there is a speed horse in the race who has a front running style that could potentially take advantage of a lack of speed. That's not really the case here, because there's nobody in here that is a consistent front running type. Maybe Eternal Hope lands on the front end, or maybe the number 8 Idea Generation is used as a quote unquote rabbit for Chad Brown, who does like to use horses like that in types of races like this where there's a lack of pace.
Yeah, and could set up well for McCulloch, the other Chad Brown runner, who will want to get a little bit of pace to run at. Idea Generation was second a couple starts back when setting the pace, going a mile and 3/8 in a similar spot in just a small field of 4. So yeah, the pace will really be intriguing in here. Do we see a horse like Eternal Hope try to get aggressive, or at least get in a really nice spot and get the jump on some of those deeper closers? And let's talk about one of those deeper closers as we kick off this field in the Flower Bowl. Warlike Goddess comes out of a win over at Delaware last time out. Waited patiently, was handled confidently in here, David. This was a good effort. And if you're just looking at her speed figures, you know, she stepped forward a little bit in her second start off the bench. If she can go one more step forward, that would put her right back in the mix with some of her better races.
Yeah, and it was nice to see her get back to the winner's circle in this Robert Dick Memorial, because you always wonder if these fillies and mares, as they get a year older, are going to come back the same. And she really has for 3 or 4 seasons now. And I think if the trip works out for her, she has to be considered the most likely winner of this race. And the trip has been the critical issue for her over a few seasons, because she's a horse that doesn't have much early speed. And she's also one of these deep closers that can tend to get a little rank early in her races. She was really pulling in the early stages of that Glens Falls last year when she got defeated by McCulloch over this turf course. So Junior Alvarado, it's incumbent on him to get her to settle early and hope that there's some pace develops ahead of her. But if he's able to get her settled and produce her run at the right time, she's going to be pretty tough to hold off.
The number 2 is La Mahana, who did stumble last time out, was in the Robert Dick Memorial behind Warlike Goddess. She is multiple graded stakes play. She'll come off a little bit of a freshening, but that was her best effort last time out, and she will need to take another big step forward just to compete with a horse like Warlike Goddess.
Yeah, she's been a little bit one-paced in all of her U.S. races, and you look at her overseas form, they were running her as far as, a mile and 3/4, a mile and 7/8 beyond that. So I wonder if she's one of these true staying types that even finds these American marathons to be a little bit short for the turn of foot that she does possess. She's run some nice speed figures. I just think she might be in a little bit over her head here.
Parnick was last year's winner and was a pretty good runner-up last time out in the Glen Falls when finishing second behind McCulloch. I think when you start to go through the recent form, though, that's the problem, has been defeated by Mikulik in 2 of the last 3. Not really a pace horse either, right? As you were talking about with the pace projector, this was an incident where she sort of ended up on the lead by default one day. You can go through her running lines, and she doesn't really have a whole lot of early speed, but she does fit pretty well here with some of these horses in the underneath spots, and at least she's in nice form. She's coming off that career best buyer speed figure.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think there was also a no speed designation on the pace projector in that Flower Bowl last year. And you can just get some wacky results in those situations sometimes. And that was the case with Parnak, who went to the front end, as you said, not as a typical speed horse and wired the field. Dylan Davis has given this horse some fantastic rides over the past year, even last time out when he just saved all the ground, had her in the right spot. And it looked like she might pull off an upset in mid stretch before McCulloch was able to assert her dominance in the late stages. She's really been running well since stretching out to these marathon distances. Just feels like even at her best, she might be a cut below some of the main players in here.
If you want to use the common rival game, she beat Chop Chop last time out. Chop Chop was also the horse that we saw Warlike Goddess running by late. Horse who could possibly take advantage of the no pace or the really slow early pace on in here, David, is Eternal Hope, just because she can sit a little closer than some of the others in here. On August the 1st, she was making her first start since October of 2023. And wow, did she really look like a horse who was just fresh and was making a first start off of a long layoff because she wanted to go. She moved early. She was close up all the way around, just pushing the pace setter. And she moved to the lead and she opened up a couple lengths. She just couldn't hold off some of the closers late in the stretch. And she probably should get a lot out of that race.
Yeah, and I don't even know if Flavian Pratt wanted her to be that close to the pace last time because she just kind of pulled him up there after breaking a little bit slowly. And as you said, they just got one a little bit too quickly up front. She and the fellow pace setter ran off a little bit by the stands the first time before he was able to rein her in. And the pace just kind of fell apart in that race. And she did fade towards the end, but it was her first start off a layoff going 1.5 miles. She figures to be fitter with that race under her belt. And maybe she's one that is forward again in a situation where she's able to relax a little bit more, having that start under her belt. I think she's pretty interesting in here. I just wonder what kind of price you're going to get because it seems like every Charlie Appleby Godolphin runner gets a little overbet these days.
The number 5, Millie Girl, has been never been worse than third on the turf in 7 turf tries, but they've all been in softer spots. She won her first 2 turf races, and then since then it's been minor awards in graded stakes races. Like in her last couple, she's been third and second in graded stakes races up at Woodbine. Just on speed figures, though, alone, she does seem like she's going to need to get faster. And when I'm looking at horses in here that I'm maybe trying to have defeat a horse like Warlike Goddess, it might be horses who could be a little more tactical. I just don't know if she's going to be able to sit back with the deep closers and kick with them. But she hasn't done a whole lot wrong in her career. This is just a tough spot.
Yeah, I don't want to be too hard on her for her prior marathon attempt when she tried 1.5 miles in the valedictory over the all-weather surface at Woodbine at the end of last year because she really did not get a good trip in that race. She was legitimately 3 to 4 wide around all 3 turns without cover. That's a tough trip to pull in a 3-turn race. So I think she ran better than it looks that day. I just wish her form this year since coming back had a little bit more spark to it. She can be a little bit one-paced. She doesn't have that turn of foot that I think is going to be required to win a race like this. So I think she could run well, but I just feel like a victory might be slightly out of reach.
The number 6, Nietzsche Marie, has just really improved this year, David. Last year, as a 3-year-old, she was solid. She was the runner-up in the Jockey Club Oaks Invitational, and that was going 1 mile and 3/8, which I think is key here. I like the fact that I feel like she was able to just move a little earlier in that race. It was a weirdly run race, but I think in this field against a group like this, she'll be able to sit a little bit closer. And I've just been really impressed with her form overall this year. She defeated White Beam. She came right back, and she was a good second behind Didia. The race on July the 13th just did not shape up for her at all that day when White Beam went gate to wire and was lone speed. And she came back with a pretty good third-place finish, I thought, at Colonial behind Moira and Fev Rover. That's tough company. And I feel like she just has taken a nice step forward from 3 to 4, getting more distance in here. Let's talk a little bit about Nietzsche Marie.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And she got two of the best rides that you can give a turf horse in those pair of starts in the Bogue and the New York when Joel Rosario was aboard her, especially that New York, where, yeah, I know she had to pause a little bit at the top of the stretch, but the backstretch move that he made up the rail to get her into contention was really a prescient thing to do from a strategic standpoint in a race that didn't have a whole lot of pace going on. Since then, I agree. The trips haven't really worked out for her. The Diana, she had no chance. Dominated on the front end. She was wide every step of the way, too far back. And even the Beverly D last time, that was a small field, and she was just losing ground outside every step of the way, trying to go around horses 2 to 3 wide. And she probably was never beating Moira anyway, who's just a little bit better than she is at this point. I don't mind her stretching back out to the mile and 3/8. I think added distance actually works for her, and she could fly a little bit under the radar here with horses like a Godolphin Appleby, a Chad Brown, and Warlike Goddess all having to take money.
Yeah, you feel like those three will all get some support, and this is a horse who maybe can float up a little bit. One of the horses to get some support will be McCulloch, who is a Grade 1 winner, I think a 6-time graded stakes winner now, and as a top 3 finisher in 14 of 18. Really consistent horse. Has proven at Saratoga, likes this trip. She's solid at this level. I guess the main knock on her would be, maybe like a couple of the others we've talked about, she's not that fast early. She doesn't really work out her own trip. She needs a little bit of help up front, and that's why maybe we see the Chad Brown Rabbit right next door, or a horse try to make this pace a little bit honest, at least give McCulloch a little something to run into. What do you think of her chances in here as we take a look at the replay of her winning the Glen Falls last time out?
She's obviously way better in these 3-turn marathons than she is going shorter. And I think when you just parse through her past performances and restrict it to these longer races, her prospects look a lot better in here. I will say in this replay, the race was kind of falling apart a little bit. Even when she beat Warlike Goddess in the Glens Falls last year, that was a race where, Warlike Goddess got a little too rank early. Maybe she used too much energy before they had to kick for the stretch, and McCulloch was able to take advantage of her. So I feel like she's been a little bit opportunistic in some of the races that she's won, some of the more high profile races where she's been successful. We'll see if the trip works out again here, but she is pretty good, and I think she merits respect in this spot.
Idea Generation looks like a horse that could be one of a few in here to show some pace. She's not been fast overall, but she has shown tactical speed in a couple starts. And the one that just sort of jumps off the page is on October the 7th, 2023 in the Waya, when she was on the lead. She finished second behind McCulloch that day. It almost feels like that's what they'll hope to do again in here. Try to get to the lead, just give her stablemate a little something to run at. And if she finishes well and hits the board, they won't have a problem in here. It'll work out for both of them if she's able to get out front, slow things down, and she'll have a better opportunity to hit the board. So it's not even a situation where you have a Rabbit just kind of really setting things up for their stablemate. I mean, her best chances in this race are trying to get out front and slow things down.
Yeah, they've used her as a pace setter before, as you said, and even Florent Giroux, who's on her here, was on her that day. So you got to think the plan is going to be similar. But as you're noting, she's not really that fast, so I don't think she's going to be going out and opening 15 lengths on this field. That's probably not the plan. Last time out, they really never had a chance to get forward with her off the layoff because she got cut off by the runner outside of her right after the start. So it kind of forced her into a trip that maybe was undesirable for her. Likely to be a pace player in this race, but I'll be surprised if she's around at the end.
Yeah, and speed figures wise, she just hasn't really been close to the rest of this group. The one race where she showed speed, and everything else, she's been just a lot slower than them. Let's round out the field here of the horses that are entered for the turf. We have a couple that are entered for the main track drawn to the outside, but we finish up with Verbier, who comes into the country for the first time after winning at York on July the 22nd, or July the 26th, excuse me. What I'm a little curious though with her, David, she only has the one race at 1.5 miles or close to these marathon distances. She was well beaten that day. Her best races have been going a little bit shorter than this. So she'll have an outside draw, and she'll have to prove that she can go this distance against some other legitimate stayers.
I will say she faced a tougher group of males in that 1.5 mile attempt 2 back, so maybe we can be a little forgiving of that. And she's only faced fillies 3 times in her career, and 2 of those were her pair of victories, and another one was a decent 4th place finish, a close one at that, coming off the layoff. So maybe running against the fillies is just where she's more comfortable. Rafe Beckett, her trader, does not ship too many horses to the United States. I think this is the first one in the past 5 years that is shipping in that is not for Breeders' Cup weekend. I think he shipped 5 horses to the Breeders' Cup. He's 0 for 5 in North America over the past 5 years. But just interested this one shows up here. Some people might not be familiar with the jockey, Eddie Greatrix, a jock who I think was coming off a 3-year layoff earlier this year, had some injuries and took multiple seasons off. And I think in his first ride back, he connected with a 125 to 1 shot. So a jockey that can boot home a long shot, but we'll see if that's the case here, because it does feel like Verbier will be a bit of a price.
Well, let's finish up the preview and take a look at the selections. David, we saw this race pretty similarly, both looking for a little bit of value here. Talk to us about Nietzsche Marie and the way that you have your selections.
Yeah, I think we covered her pretty well when we discussed her. She's just a horse that is pretty trip dependent, and she's proven when the trip works out, she's just as good as almost anybody else in this race, and I'm not too concerned about the distance. I actually think she's got plenty of stamina, and the mile and 3/8 is going to work for her, and just going out for the connection that she does, she might not take as much money as she really deserves in here, but I always respect anything that Butch Reed ships to New York.
Yeah, and I felt like Warlike Goddess and McCulloch, they're the two measuring stick horses in this race. They're the two horses you'll have to beat. Maybe a horse like Eternal Hope can get a tactical advantage, or a horse like Nietzsche Marie, who's just in really nice form, and we'll try to get some value on that one. Thanks so much for joining us here. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel below so you'll get previews like this for all the big races, and head to drf.com for everything you need.